Now is Nabila Ramdani, a journalist and expert on Islamic affairs, to talk more about today's events. Thanks very much for coming onto the programme this evening. Are you personally surprised by what we've seen today, given the level of security that followed the Charlie Hebdo attacks?
Well, it seems to be a random attack, and as your reporter was hinting at in his report just now, it seems to be somebody who jumped on the radical Islamist bandwagon, if I may put it that way, to sort out what seems to be a personal grievance with his boss. It's the older story around, I'm afraid, but there seems to be an overlap between somebody who's using radical Islamism to sort out a political, personal grievance or indeed a grudge with his own boss. And of course the investigation is ongoing, and we'll be hearing more details about the motivation of the terror suspect.
So you don't feel that authorities can actually do any more, do you? Because, I mean, this chap, for example, was actually known to the authorities, wasn't he? He was on the surveillance list after all.
Well, absolutely, and that's one of the greatest problems I've often discussed with the security agent spokesperson in France. This is, and the very fair response is that it's actually extremely difficult it takes at least 30 to 35 people to adequately follow a terror suspect at all times. So you can see, the effort and indeed the energy and indeed the number of people it mobilizes to properly follow a terror suspect. The problem in this case is that we're dealing with somebody who had no criminal record and who had in fact been investigated over radicalization since 2006, but then had been dropped off the radar by French police forces since 2008, and there was no there were minor reports of complaints of antisocial behavior linked to the terror suspect, but he had no previous convictions, and in fact he was believed to have links with the radical ideology, but he was not involved in terror activity beforehand. So you can see the difficulty in keeping tabs effectively on a suspect of his kind.
Do you think, just focusing on Tunisia now, do you think there needs to be a rethink on how they tackle terrorism in the Middle East, given that there has been a huge military campaign against Islamic State there, but again, we're seeing this terrorist attack on a hotel beach?
Well, absolutely. I think there is certainly a connection between the kind of post-Arab Spring societies we've seen emerging after the removal of dictators and indeed the surge of radical Islamisms or jihadism, or indeed activities linked to Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, or indeed ISIS. Certainly in Tunisia we've seen a series of political assassinations after the removal of the dictator Hosni Mubarak, Ben Ali in Tunisia. But the attack we've seen today looks like the one we've seen not long ago in March against the Bardo Museum, which was specifically targeting foreign visitors. I think the differences with today's attack is today's attacks will capture the imagination of the world more vividly, precisely because anybody can identify with the victims, with with lying on a beach. Effectively, you can't get a softer target than people completely relaxing on the beach or by the pool, with their children, or lightly dressed and indeed completely totally relaxed. So you can't get a softer target than that. And the Mediterranean coasts of Tunisia have been associated with that type of holidays. Anybody wants to enjoy a sun-kissed holiday on the Med in Tunisia, and this is the kind of holiday people read about in glossy magazines. And so this kind of vicious attacks will have particular resonance around the world, because anybody can associate with the victims.
There is speculation there may have been a link between these attacks. I mean, it is speculation, people can only surmise whether there was or not, but what's your view?
I don't think the attacks in France and indeed Tunisia are directly connected. I don't think that's the case, but they're certainly a continuation. They both represent a continuation in this kind of in the types of attacks we've seen happening over the last few years. And dare I say, terrorism, it has become a global threat that's affecting every country, and that's one of the biggest scourges in the 21st century.
One concern and a blowback from all this is perhaps anti-Muslim sentiment that may now be generating in France as a result of these attacks. Do you think we're likely to see more of that after today's events?
Well, I think that will be one of the consequences indeed of these types of attacks, not least because there is a conflation in these type of attacks which often use radical Islam or indeed religion to justify their attacks, and indeed a world-respected religion, a peaceful religion, which has nothing to do with that kind of vicious attacks. So I think inevitably there is going to be a conflation between the two, and dare I say possibly a backlash against Muslim communities around the world.
OK, Nabila, we have to leave it there, but thanks for talking to us today. That was Nabila Ramdani, a journalist and expert on Islamic affairs. Thank you.